I'm Lance Crisler. I'm a Fulbright Fellow awardee for the year of 2014-15. I'm a PhD candidate at UCLA in Los Angeles, and I'm affiliated in Taiwan with the Academia Sinica and National Taiwan University, the history department there. Well, I came to Taiwan requesting funding so that I could work on a project at Academia Sinica, where they have a group of scholars who focus on a group of bamboo texts that have been discovered in the past 20 years or so in China. The texts themselves are not here in Taiwan. The manuscripts are in China, but the scholars who specialize in these type of texts are working at Academia Sinica. So the texts are about early legality in Qin and Han period China, and they cover certain things like statutes, laws, contracts, things like that. And then there's a group of among these texts, there's a group of smaller texts that are about legal cases, courtroom cases. And so my specific project is about those cases and the role of early court cases in Chinese literature and literary composition. When I came initially, the first part of my project was I devoted it almost entirely to translating, because the cases are brand new. They're brand new to us in the world now. They're about 2,200 years old, but they've only been sparsely translated at random spots. There's been a couple of scholars working on them in both China and in America and in Europe, I guess. But there hasn't been a complete translation done of them yet, of all the court cases. And so it's not that that's super crucial, but I did devote a lot of the early period of my work at Academia Sinica to just translating. So I would work with scholars there, grad students and professors who could help me translate, because so much of the language in these texts is very technical, specialized language. And even people with years of classical Chinese training don't really know how to translate, and you know, so my preliminary work was successful in that regard. So I was able to learn a lot about how the early legal texts function, the early vocabulary and technical language was working in these texts. The second period was more of an analytical period, where I, having translated these texts, worked with them into a broader theoretical model that I was developing about what they were doing in China 2,200 years ago to make such texts as these, and how they might compare with other types of literary texts. Probably the most important thing I discovered coming here to work on these manuscript texts is that they are, in fact, I mean, they are what we all think they were. And when we first saw them, we all thought right away that they are legal texts that talk about laws and contracts, and then also are very curious because they contain court cases, right? But my analysis, and using the library tools and the sort of academic intellectual tools available to me in Taiwan, really helped me to place these court cases within the broader spectrum of what I consider to be the earliest part of fiction writing in China. They show that they are part of an early narrative practice that uses fictional tools to make stories. And when I say that, I don't mean to say that these are court cases that are faked or made up. They're not. They're actual cases that happen to actual people. But the way that they're written down on a piece of paper or on a bunch of bamboo, in this case, it's pretty obvious through using my analytical tools, analytical framework, that these things were refined, reworked, distilled, and then made into tidy, clean stories that often read like detective novels or short stories of mystery fiction, things like that. And so that's the really gripping part, and that's the thing that's new for this specific body of texts. A lot of historians in Chinese literature and Chinese history, they know about these texts, and if you ask them questions about them, they'll give you a good response. But they'll go, I know what these are. They're about this and this and this. But nobody in the world right now, as far as I know, is really talking about them in terms of their compositional characteristics. And what I mean by that specifically is the fictional compositional characteristics. And that's something that I feel like I've learned from being here this year. You realize after reading these short stories that these ideas of suspense and anticipation that go into a gripping, kind of compelling narrative, these are ideas that were happening a long, long time ago. They're not something brand new. It's not something that we're inventing with like Sherlock Holmes stories, or it's not something that we're doing with movies that's new. It's just a newer way, using a newer technological media to do it. What I hope to show is that in the broad range of literary representational practice, we have very specific examples from a very, very long time ago in China that show that these are sort of eternal questions that we've yet to answer as a species. And so the work that I hope to perform, and I hope that I can join it well with other scholars working in similar ideas, is that we can better understand how narrative is a fully integrated part of who we see ourselves in the universe.